Shall we wait for a moment on the roll call?
We can.
There we go.
There she comes. Yep. Oh, did she?
You have the power to make the call.
I know. I just like to have everybody here. I think it's better.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Oh, hi, Greg. You looked so bundled up walking your dog today.
Okay, well, all the agencies are represented, so let me call this meeting to order. And could we have a roll call, please?
Director Penrose.
Here.
Director Lohman.
Here.
Director Clark.
Here.
Director Ruddock, not as yet, I guess. Director Slater Carter.
I am all in here.
Chair Dye.
Here. All right,
Okay.
I'm going to ask Jeremy, because I understand we have an item to add to the agenda.
Yes, we need to add an urgency item. And I can get the piece of paper. I realized my printer didn't work, but there's an urgency item we need to add that came to our attention just today that the chair brought to my attention, dealing with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, a basin plan amendment that they will be considering and likely approving this Wednesday. And it involves Pillar Point and Venice Beach within Half Moon Bay and Granada service area. In any event, there's some changes that we may want to consider, although it's very late in the game, asking the board to make. So I'd like to add that with the board's indulgence, an item 4C. So we'll have the opportunity to discuss that. But it requires a 2/3 vote of the board in order to add that as an urgency item.
Yes.
Could I have a motion to add that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion of this matter? Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Penrose.
Aye.
Director Lohman.
Yep.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Ruddock.
Aye.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes.
Chair Dye.
Aye. All right.
Motion approved. Yep.
Okay, great. All right, moving on. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak on items not on our agenda tonight? And Kishan, have you heard from anyone who would like to speak?
No, I haven't received any email or any request as of now.
Do we have anyone here who wants to speak? All right. Shall we move on then? Moving on to the consent agenda, approving the minutes of January 5th meeting, approving disbursements, and authorizing the general manager to attend the annual water reuse symposium from March 15th to 25th.
Move the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Yes. Second.
Lots of seconds. Could we have a roll call, please?
Director Penrose.
Aye.
Director Lohman.
Yes.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Ruddock.
Aye.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes.
Chair Dye.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Great. All right, moving on to regular business. Item 4A, decentralized wastewater recycling systems, and we are going to hear a presentation.
Yes, you may recall at the last board meeting, the gentleman, Ronaldo, who was introduced to us by Director Penrose, and we had said that we would bring it back to the board and see his presentation on wastewater recycling systems. So we have Ronaldo, as well as his colleague, Jim Hotchkiss, who is from the East Coast. So thank you very much, Jim, for staying awake and participating in this. And I will allow Ronaldo to take over. I'll make sure that he has the rights to share screen. Okay, over to you, Ronaldo. You can share your screen and start off your presentation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. I'll try to be as brief as possible, as quick as possible. Hold on. My screen just disappeared. Oh, there it is. Can you see that?
No. Yes.
Yes, we can see something coming up.
Oh, you can see it. Okay. All right. So this idea is really not a new one, but it would work here. In particular, it would work in a lot of communities. The fact that we're looking at wastewater treatment solutions that are brand new in both technology and an application is important for the future, because we're getting into situations where water is even a greater issue from a technical standpoint, as well as from a quantity and cost standpoint. So if we're looking at solutions to replace or repair or upgrade existing plants, replace septic systems, and use membrane bioreactors for recycling water, we could also look at returning some profits back into the operations of agencies such as SAM, so that selling the water then can become a tool for the city and for the authorities. So with that, we'd like to think of ourselves as progressive and advanced in science as we go forward. But this is probably more where we are in a lot of cases, because we're still polluting our own home environment. So we really need to upgrade our game.
Let's make it clear that our facilities are not polluting right now.
Thank you.
I want to make that point. We're doing a very good job.
Yes, they are doing a great job.
Thank you.
But the reality is that a lot of our wastewater is going right into the oceans and the bays. So we're processing it, we're spending money doing it, but we're not taking advantage of the full recycling process yet. So that's our goal. The wells themselves, the groundwater is being pumped at a very high rate these days because water is cheap and we can afford to do it, but it's not going to last forever.
Well, let me interject and say, not here. Half-Moon Bay, Coastside County Water District imports water from Hetch Hetchy, and Montera has a groundwater monitoring program, including wells.
Right. Okay. So we started talking about places like Singapore, where the water is in short supply or non-existent, and they have to recycle more than 50% of their sewage water into drinking water. We don't have that issue here, obviously. But recycling is part of an essential community and a sustainable community. And so we need to be looking at recycled water as part of our full circle of water history and future. So one concept that I'm proposing here is a microgrid concept. Sorry, let me go back just a second. Microgrid concept that decentralizes the processing so that it's easier to process and easier to recycle locally, rather than pumping water uphill or pumping it long distances from a central facility. So those are the things that need to be dealt with. My history personally has been quite extensive for the last 20 years. And both Jim and I go back 20 years ago when I was working on the Water Garden and the Smurf projects in Santa Monica. I was working also on the Malibu Colony and Malibu Town Center, recycling proposals and projects. Ventura County, I'll show you these in about a second, and LA County housing development projects. Now the work is going on in wineries and breweries and townships across the country. And so these solutions are not unique to this area. This is a general educational show that wants to show you what's going on and how we can rethink how we're doing business. So the Water Garden was the first place that I mentioned. It was in 2000 that we replaced the treatment plant here. And the water, this is an isolated development. As you can see, this is owned by JP Morgan. It's in Santa Monica. It's 1.2 million square feet, and they recycle 85 to 90% of their water on site for lots of reasons. but the main one being that they weren't allowed to take that water anywhere else, so they had to recycle it themselves. And it turned out to be a very good idea. The city of Santa Monica then took that idea and said, okay, well, we'd like to create a plant that can process 500,000 gallons a day. And this yellow marker is the site of that plant. And now it's been around for 20 years, and they take 500,000 gallons a day every single day and pump it back into the community here, where they irrigate gardens. They pump it back into buildings, into high schools and other places where it's recycled as purple water, purple pipe, and they get the benefit of that 500,000 gallons a day. Now, the
what is the source of that that runoff? That's storm drain water, or is it sewer? Is it wastewater?
It is storm drain water, which is much more polluted than sewer water. And here's the plant in a bigger view. You can go online and check out the Smurf plant. They have a very nice video of the whole plant and its operation. And you can see the main pieces of the plant, which are these two containers. This container, which is the processing tank, and this small container, about the size, a little bigger than a car, but this small container are the electronics and the controls for the system. So all of it is above ground, easily accessible. The tanks are all below ground, and the rest of the plant here is for example, ultraviolet and ozone treatment for purifying the water to past tertiary treatment. And then it's pumped into the community, back into the community, and the city makes money off of it by selling it at the same price that they sell fresh water, drinking water.
Is the city also the water agency?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The city owned 5 wells, 3 of which were then at one point back in the late 90s. They were all polluted by local gas stations and underground tanks. So they were short of water. And that's why they allow the water garden to build their facility so they can process their own water.
So the city is doing this under the auspices of its stormwater powers or its water district powers?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the full question.
The city is doing this under its authority as the stormwater regulatory agency, or is it doing it under its authority as the water agency for the city?
Technically, I don't know which title they use for this operation, but they've been trying to eliminate the stormwater runoff, which is polluting Santa Monica Bay. So it's been an active effort for many years. I don't know what agency they're using for that. But.
Madam Chair, I'd like us to reserve questions for the end of the presentation.
Sure.
Okay. So anyway, so another project is the scale of this equipment. Here's a building, a small shack basically, but a small building on a site, 22 feet wide by 18 feet deep. And it is for a community of 46 homes. And it's designed as the above ground components, the pumps and the UV filtration, as well as the membrane tanks. This is all above ground, and the rest of the tanks that store the water, the waste, and the purified water are underground. But just to show you how small of a scale that can be, here's a project, another project that was a colony of condominiums, about 380 units, and they had built a septic system along the waterfront because they were polluting the water with their existing septic system. However, this one failed as well. As you can see, the water would easily go over into the sand and kill any bacteria from the septic system. So what we did, we came back with a design that basically immersed the membranes into the tanks, the existing tanks, sealed them up so no salt water could infiltrate, and then just recycle that sewage throughout the campus. So, so the issue is that sewage treatment plants are somewhat obsolete because they were designed 50, 70 years ago, 100 years ago, throughout the Bay Area and in most areas. And the secondary treatment does not solve the big problem, which is that it purifies it enough to be able to recycle. And so the plants basically spend, in this case, what, $6 to $8 million a year to process all that water and then lose it all. They basically don't take advantage of what they could do with it. And I know that the study in 2010 pointed out that if you treated the water with tertiary treatment on site at the SAM plant, you could ship that water and recycle it in the community, sell it off, and gain value out of that. Well, the Bay Area is full of sewage treatment plants that were designed for gravity flow with primary treatment back in the 50s, and then upgraded over the years to increase the flow as well as get to secondary treatment. But at the end of the day, they still lose all that water, and we're talking billions of gallons of water by pumping it back into the bay and not taking advantage of what they spent purifying. So the report, SRT report, basically suggests putting in a membrane bioreactor system onto the existing plant, using some of the existing storage containers and tanks for storage purposes, and then shipping it off-site to be able to sell it as secondary, as tertiary treated water for the community. So the site plan is right in the center here is the plant, and the plant extends quite a bit. I don't have to tell you that, you all know that, but it has no ability to recycle unless it puts in purple pipe all the way back to the source of the water. Now, the source in this case is the hotel and the golf course, which has a pipeline already, an existing pipeline for supplying water, which could then be reused quickly and be able to utilize that water at 500,000 gallons a day, roughly. So the analysis did not include recycling all of the water, which ranges anywhere from 1.6 to 2 million gallons per day. Some of the water can be used with less treatment to become a nutritious carrier for nitrogens and phosphorus for applications in agriculture and greenhouses, which is a valuable commodity here in Apple Bay. You have lots of commercial strips. They could use the water for their machines, for their toilets, public restrooms, and then the increasing costs could be reduced by selling the water back to the customers, and in a process that would be phased over time, so it does not have to all happen at once. Air treatment, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. Basically, membranes that only accept water through their pores and allow water to be quickly cleaned of the effluent, of the feed water pollutants, and send off an effluent that is much more treatable and as a tertiary level treatment. These are the bioreactor processes. It's very similar to what you currently have. Just the addition of these membrane tanks would then you could take existing aeration bioreactors, add the membranes, and then you get high quality final effluent out of it. The sludge, similar to what you're doing now, the sludge accumulates, it can be recycled through the process again, or the really heavy sludge can be then hauled off to discharge or be recycled into a fuel or a fertilizer. I'm going too quickly, please stop me and slow me down. I don't want to repeat what you already know, but so here's the modular plant and how scaled it is. This is a small plant that is maybe 2,500 gallons per day, but can be expanded in a modular fashion. The membranes are in this container, and you can quadruple it by adding more containers to it. But the control systems are all here in the small little unit that basically run this process. And it's a very low maintenance, hands-off maintenance, basically. There are so many checks and balances in the technology that makes this like your cell phone. You have more memory in this than we had for many years in the bigger plants. So during peak hours, you can run these trains so that you go from 25,000 to 100,000 gallon capacity as you process and your peaks happen to occur during various parts of the season. Again, the same kind of units. Here's that small module with members, and then here a larger storage tank. So you could run a variety of different scale plants. This size plant, as we showed up here, can now be reduced in scale, and it is reduced in scale to do a single home. So you can do a small home of 500 to 1,000 gallons a day off of one of these systems, and the price is very affordable. So this is the change, a big change in the market that I've been waiting for 20 years. And it's been created now. It exists in the marketplace and is being implemented across the country and various parts of the world. And for example, here's another below ground configuration. Here's a little outhouse that has basically 20 by 20, that has all of the membranes and the controls and pumps inside of it. And then below ground is your big tank or multiple tanks, depending on the volume that you want to carry. Here's an above ground installation with 5,000 gallons per day. Again, it's a relatively small footprint, maybe 20 feet by 12 feet. Small container, shipping container could probably handle that. Here's a bigger package that belonged at one time to GE, which is, I think, out of the business now. But they began modularizing these containers about 20 years ago, and they have a slew of varieties that they've exported around the world for use. And we are inundated now with a variety of options based on size. Now, back to the smaller scale. Every one of our communities, including our blocks, a single block, can be self-contained. So for example, this community could certainly take a grouping like this, put a single plant somewhere along that point, and then recycle that water back to the land, the agricultural land that's surrounding it. So we have the options of taking schools, of taking hospitals, hotels, and making them self-sufficient. So they can recycle most of their own water in-house and reuse it right there. No pumping long distance, no worry about broken pipes in case of earthquakes or disasters. So basically isolating the users from massive destruction. Sorry, let me go back slightly. So the total site plan for Half Moon Bay includes groupings like these, residential groupings near agricultural land, especially here like at Miramar. You have an industrial type of greenhouse operation going here. You have the golf course and residential units all within, so they could all become self-contained and self-serving communities. You don't need to ship that water. You could use that central plant and its water to go to the closest locations. In this case, since the pipe exists already to the golf course, that may be a good use for that. But you also have all sorts of other options nearby where if you're going to put purple pipe, this is where you may limit it to local areas so that the cost can go down significantly. And then provide modular units that then go to areas like this, where you have a large operation with agriculture around it, and you can utilize that modular plant locally. The town center for Half Moon Bay has several opportunities. Like I said, you could do a single block, or you could do a grouping of blocks and then serve, for instance, this agricultural area, which is right nearby. You have housing development and commercial development all in these areas, which all create wastewater and could use wastewater. So again, you can decentralize the concept. Here's a single block concept, a small plant at the end of a block collecting the sewage across the block. There's a sewer line right in the street here, which then could be for excess water. You could dump it there, or you could mine the sewer and recycle it here and pump it back across the block so that these 22 houses can all get their own recycled water locally. The system could be run off of solar power, off of the same community that you have here, and each of the members could share part of the cost of putting that plant together. The cost would be reduced significantly if you could do that. El Granada has similar issues. Previously, they had their own treatment system and treatment plant, and they could go back to that concept to some extent, but more so be able to install smaller systems that take care of the harbor area, for example. This is Princeton. It has its own scale and its own types of wastewater based on the industrial buildings that are located there. And that can be handled independently, and that water can be handled and processed locally. You have this pond, which is a constant problem because of the runoff. That could be treated as well as part of whatever plant you can generate in this arena. Then you have areas like Princeton's dining areas, where you have breweries, and the breweries dump some of their content into your system and then upset your system, as has recently happened. So you could isolate that area, for example, create their own plant and require that they manage that themselves so they don't upset the whole apple cart by polluting or dumping excess material or brew. Again, this is that area with hotels, restaurants. They each create their own type of wastewater. You can create a small plant for the restaurant area by itself to recycle that water, reuse it locally, or pump it nearby. So, or put it into the ocean. But I think the idea of dumping water in the ocean is probably not as good an idea as it may have sounded originally. Right now, that's just wasted water. You process it, why waste it? Miramar, similar, you have this industrial type of a greenhouse area, and then you have residents all around generating waste, and instead of pumping it down to a location and expecting something to be pumped back, you could just pump it locally. Here's a Miramar blown up a little bit, same issue. Ontario has a similar issue. Each of these have different physical requirements, like pumping uphill. Pumps that move the sewage from Ontario to the plant could be eliminated by having them treated locally. Tourist attractions today are also important. The hotels, the golf courses, we have specific facilities that could use better sources, cheaper sources of water for cleaning, for doing things other than drinking water, using it for other than drinking water. We have camping, parks, recreation facilities that generate waste during peak periods during the summer. So all of these are variables that can be custom treated if you have a policy of using smaller plants to solve very specific issues. We get 100,000 people showing up at pumpkin festivals, and they need to be handled in some way besides the porta potties. So adding something to the porta potties or using the waste from the porta potties to process that would probably be a good idea as well. So here's a cost and revenue model. Right now, we're generating 584 million gallons per year at 1.6 million gallons per day. Well, if you were to take that and recycle that, even at a penny per gallon, you could make your cost for running the plant pay for itself. So we need to reduce the energy costs. We also need to reduce the recycling costs. And so this would be a way to do that and have the users pay for that recycled water either through the district, through the district, the water district, or through the cities themselves, but somehow connect them so that it all ends up balancing out at the end of the day. The cost for secondary treatment it ranges so dramatically depending on what part of the country you're in. And I don't know what the cost of that is today, but these plants are very affordable. And I think that if you look at specific areas and apply them to those, you would have a better understanding of what the total cost is going to be. So at a penny a gallon, right now drinking water is at about 0.6 of a penny per gallon. But if you're processing it, it's going to cost a little bit more. It depends on what the agency decides to charge for that recycled water. If you have an overabundance, your price is going to go down, obviously. So the next step is to really look at the local wells, the local supplies. You have many issues. It's a complex area of former sites, some surface dams that are in place. There are various septic systems that are still active in the region. They should probably be eliminated because they probably should be replaced by better systems. Most people don't take care of their septic systems. So anyway, this is a plea for more enforcement to make sure that septic systems are not polluting our oceans or rivers or tributaries to rivers. So I'd like to really talk about specific questions that you may have now, and we can conclude this presentation. Oh, and also, here are some potential funding sources for developing these ideas. There are plenty around. They're constantly changing. And with this new administration, I think we'll have even more opportunities to clean up our waters by federal grants and funds. Anyway, this is a good time for questions. Any questions?
Director Ruddick.
Yeah. Where's the microgrid piece?
I'm sorry?
Where's the microgrid piece?
Well, the microgrid is all of the ones you've seen in terms of a city block or a unit for a small house. That is
Typically, when we talk about a microgrid, we're talking about, you know, sort of a small energy system, you know, to power a smaller area. So I'm not really understanding how your use of the word microgrid.
okay. Well, that is another type of microgrid. The power microgrid is a totally separate presentation, but it's the same principle. If you use for example, PG&E as a source of power with those long transmission lines, and an earthquake happens or a storm happens, and they break down, they shut off our whole area. Well, if we have an earthquake here too, and the power goes out, SAM goes out, they have reserve fuel for diesel generators. But if a pipe breaks, we're all out of luck. So the microgrid concept really is you can have a microgrid in this complex right here, a small plant that just treats this process area. Another one could be right next door. Like I said, these are small enough you could do a single house on it. So that microgrid is really a small membrane bioreactor plant, self-contained and operating independently of the grid.
Okay, thank you. Could you stop screen sharing so we can see all the directors?
Yes.
Director Lohman next.
There you go.
Continue on.
Yeah, Ronaldo, thanks. First of all, we've just formed a 2040 committee, which is in divergent stage right now, just trying to gather all the information we can. So thank you for this input. You're talking here about MBR, your membrane bioreactive technology. Is that a generic term which covers pretty much all new recycling systems at this point, or are there other technologies we should be looking at the same time? Because we're gathering information from as wide a source as we can right now.
Okay, well, I believe MBR is a specific kind of treatment system that uses membranes to purify water. There are all kinds of other systems that are not related to membranes that also purify water in different ways. But this is the most sophisticated system. This is what started out in space when our astronauts went into shuttles and went to the moon. This was invented many years ago in various forms, but I'll let Jim explain that a little bit, because he is the master of this technology.
Yeah, just briefly, there are very many different technologies available for treating wastewater, but if you're dealing with sewage, they all pretty well come back to the same basic principle, which is a bacterial digestion system. So it sort of mimics your body, where you have a digestive system that consumes organic material. Wastewater is organic material, at least sewage is pretty well all organic material. And back in the early 1900s, they developed a process called activated sludge, which is the basis of pretty well all wastewater treatment plants around the world. And that technology is still very much a viable solution. However, activated sludge, it has its limitations. Pure activated sludge has its limitations in that the bacteria are sensitive to changes in the food supply, just like you would be if you were a vegan and all of a sudden you ate a tomahawk steak, you'd be upset, your gut would get upset. Wastewater treatment plants are pretty much similar. And the traditional wastewater treatment plant, like you see at SAM, you have an organic digestion system, and that's followed by a clarifier. If the digestion system gets upset, the clarifier doesn't settle things properly, and you have overloads that can go back into the environment. The digestion system at SAM is designed for a very steady diet of food coming in, typical sewage. If all of a sudden you start to get microbreweries or distilleries or wineries or whatever, the typical wastewater from a brewery is 10 to 20 times stronger than the wastewater from a house or a hotel or a shopping center. So as you get those types of developments, the current solution starts to fail. Where the membrane, so in order to improve the efficiency of the activated sludge system, Over the last 20 plus years, different technologies have been developed to replace the clarifier, because in most cases, the clarifier is the weak link in a wastewater treatment plant.
I don't know.
Get rid of the clarifier and replace it with a membrane. Instead of running the digestion system at a relatively low concentration, you can increase its concentration by 4 or 5 times. When you do that, it's like putting the wastewater treatment plant on high octane fuel. It can handle high strength wastes. It can handle spikes in the wastewater treatment plant. So if you look at things like the Patriot Stadium in Massachusetts, they get 80,000 people there for a game, and then you might not get any people there for a week or 2 weeks. They put in a membrane bioreactor so it could handle those spikes and those peaks. If you look at communities with large numbers of craft breweries and wineries, they've switched over to membrane bioreactors to handle those spikes in concentration. So while there are different ways to improve wastewater treatment plant, it comes down to 2 basic options. One is what SRT looked at about 20 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever they did their study, which is take your existing plant and put a membrane on the back end. If you do that, you can clean up the wastewater that's coming out of the existing plant and potentially reuse it. The problem with that solution is you still have a relatively low strength biological treatment system. So it's not as efficient. And the cost of that has not, the cost of the alternative, the membrane bioreactor, has come down dramatically. With a membrane bioreactor, you could go into the existing wastewater treatment plant at SAM, put the membranes directly into the digester, the activated sludge plant, free up the clarifier completely. In the same footprint, you could increase its capacity by 3 to 4 times and be able to handle any load that came in from, say, a brewery or a winery or a distillery. So if you're going to change that plant, if you're looking to upgrade the plant, the most viable technology to look at anywhere in the world today would be to convert that plant to a membrane bioreactor. So typically look at this as an upgrade.
I'm not sure we can really go into a whole thing about ideas to revamp the plant tonight. So that was point 1. What was point 2? Or option 2?
Oh, the other option was the tertiary filter on the back end, which is what was proposed 10 years ago.
All right, I wanted to ask one question, which was, at the very end of your presentation, you cited the fact that the costs of these treatments are from $5 to $45 a gallon, and that the revenue you can get back is a penny a gallon?
Oh, that was, there were 2 separate issues. One is the cost of a secondary treatment plant, which is from a national survey, ranges dramatically if you were to build one brand new. That's what it was as an estimate, rough idea. It's off the internet. The other was the cost of treated water and what you would charge. Now, I put in a penny a gallon, but you set the rates for that. So as an agency, so I don't know what you're charging for that water, but I believe the golf course was somewhere around that price, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. More questions? And it's a very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. It seems very complicated to try to really assess tonight, but I certainly want to hear more questions. Director Clark.
Ronaldo, you started off with numerous projects done mostly in Southern California, it looked like. What was your and or your company's role when you said you did these projects? What did that mean?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm an architect, and what I do is I design and build facilities, and I specify equipment for facilities from HVAC to everything, electrical, etc. So I review the products. I check out their validity, their cost. I manage that whole process. I'm not an expert on electrical systems or total structural systems, but I manage those experts and the expectations and present them to the client. So I select the best solutions for the client in a package, whether it be a building or a complex of buildings. That's how I get involved.
And those projects that you showed as examples, were they all producing potable water, or you seem to be emphasizing water for irrigation?
They were, at that time, they were all for non-potable uses, but recycled water, yes. Non-potable.
Thank you.
People still have issues, whether they like it or not, they have a yuck factor with taking sewage and turning it into drinking water. But as I mentioned, Singapore's doing it.
That will
Even
change.
famous people have done it on television, showing you that you can actually drink that. It's actually good water.
Okay, Director Reddick.
So I actually don't have a question, but I did want to say, first of all, this is great food for thought.
Yes.
But I think we're mixing a lot of issues here. You know, there's the issue of how we treat stormwater, and you know how we've treated stormwater in California has evolved quite a bit. You know, using low impact development, capturing stormwater on site, etc. So that's sort of separate from, you know, hooking up local sewage lines to a package plant like on site. And how you would treat stormwater and do that, you know, I don't know, but that's really complex. There's also, you know, the regulatory environment that's evolving to deal with both stormwater and drinking water and wastewater. I'm trying to come up with a one water solution that takes advantage of technology to deal with scarcity. There's the economy of scale issue. How do we do distributed processing at economies of scale, you know, to make it so it's affordable? I think we're just mixing a lot of things here. And there's new legislation in California that's been introduced that would authorize wastewater treatment plants in California to also process stormwater, so that you could take stormwater from various neighborhoods and actually connect it to the sewage system and have your W-top process that. So I think, you know, there may be tweaks that we can do to deal with like wineries and maybe new residential developments or commercial developments. But I think it has to be looked at sort of on a micro scale to find out how it works. The other thing is, because we're looking at all sources of water, including groundwater, the regulatory environment is evolving to, you know, place restrictions on, you know, the groundwater quality and the use of groundwater, and putting stormwater into the ground and then taking it out again. So this is a really, really deep, profound, complex issue that we're looking at. The concept of distributed, I think, is definitely worth looking at. But, you know, beyond that, you know, we would have to really, I think, drill down to individual problems to find out, you know, what are good solutions for individual problems. The holistic solution, I don't think we're there yet. But, you know, it certainly is worth looking at, you know, pieces of these new technologies and figuring out, you know, are they realistic? Can we produce, you know, potable water, or at least, you know, reduce our environmental impact at a cost-effective, you know, rate? So I think what you're talking about is massive. I don't have many questions because I'm trying to wrap my mind around it. But I definitely appreciated the presentation.
Yes.
I appreciate your question, because it is complicated, and that's why I pointed out the first two projects, which was the water garden, taking sewage and turning it into usable water, and then the same technology down the street with the city taking stormwater and recycling it, and it's actually feeding the water garden project as well. So it was the end result is the same clean water, regardless of where it came from. And sewage is a lot cleaner than stormwater. And so when you get into stormwater, you have all sorts of other complications and issues. But it is connected. I mean, your septic systems are polluting your groundwater if they're not being maintained. So it's all related, and it comes back to when you open your tap, what do you have and what's the quality of it? And you're going to find it coming from a variety of sources with time.
Thank you very much. I think we have other things to get to tonight, Catherine. I'm going to come to you next. Catherine, you're next, but just let me say, I think this has given us a lot to think about, and I don't think we're going to resolve all our questions on this tonight. So I think we need to move on, and I appreciate it. Catherine, do you want to finish this up? It's the last question. You're muted. You're muted. Catherine, you're muted.
Greg has had his hand up since before I did, and we both had our hands up before Matthew. So I think Greg needs a chance to be offered a chance to speak as well.
Okay, I am not seeing those hands up unless the person is.
I understand that was a problem when I was chair too. So we can wave our hands in front of the camera.
When you were waving your hand, I saw it, and I vowed to get to you next. So Greg,
I figured.
Let me call.
I look forward to having Ronaldo participate as a citizen on this upcoming committee. This is a project I've been advocating for about 10 years now, and the technology has come a long, long ways. However, there are a few things you said that that are not appropriate here, and I think they are a bit of a scare story for people. One, I am very familiar with the septic systems in Montera and Moss Beach. They are not polluting our groundwater. The county monitors them, people maintain them, and there aren't very many in the way of that in terms of El Granada or Half Moon Bay too. So I would ask you, I'm more than happy to talk to you about that, but I would ask you to change your statement on that, because that is not a problem out here.
Okay.
The septic systems go in on lots of a minimum of an acre and more likely 5 acres. So there's lots of room for them to work.
I appreciate that. Yeah, as long as they're maintained, they work. So that's
they work, and they are maintained, and the county is in charge of them. Mm-hmm. So that said, I will go back, Barbara, to just looking forward to participating with you on this committee, because this is something I've been involved with for 10 years.
I love it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And let me call on Greg, and with my apologies for somehow having missed you.
Barbara, I'm going to respect your request to keep things short. What I would like is the email for the presenter and his partner, and I will address my questions in email to them and to the board.
Great.
So we can see the answers and you can consider them in the context of what a potential project would be.
Great. I will send you a copy of the presentation as well, so you can use it as a reference for your questions. And at the end of it is my email and phone number. So please feel free to call.
Thank you so much. It was really, really interesting, and I think get us started in thinking about some new ideas. Is there anyone else who wants to say anything on this topic?
No, I'd just like to say thank you to Ronaldo and James. It was very informative, provoking of lots of thoughts and questions.
And I would like to thank Kishan and Tim for showing me the existing plan and walking me around and being very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronaldo.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Moving on to item number 4B, review and authorize general manager to issue an RFP for capacity and treatment process study for sand plant. Kishan.
Yeah, so as you're all aware, we have carried out certain changes in 1979, and then in the late 90s, we did a plant expansion. And thereafter, we have really done a lot of improvements in the plant, but those have really not resulted in any change in the impact of the design or capacity of the plant. As recent as last year in October, we had a lot of process upsets, which have been giving updates in almost every board meeting. We've had a very high influent BOD, which has impacted the plant process very badly. And as a result of which the effluent BOD has been impacted. And of course the TSS too. So therefore, we thought this is the right time to get in an engineering consultant to look at the plant and check out the various capacities, find out what is available right now and how we are geared up for any variations in influent BODs or any influent loadings for that matter, and see how it would impact the plant. So this is what we'd like to have so that it doesn't repeat in future. And therefore this RFP came into existence, and we would like to send it out to various engineering firms. And the RFP is also attached in the board packet, which gives a clear picture of what we are going through right now, what levels we are going through, and we hope to take this up as quickly as we can. Sam would like to be proactive to whatever is happening right now, because we know that there are violations in October and November, and we are positive that these are not going to be acceptable by the water board, and we would like to be proactive and make sure that these do not repeat in future. And that's it. If you have any questions, staff is willing to answer.
We have questions. Kishan, were you going to modify the language at one point in the RFP?
Yes, on page 1 of the RFP was brought to our notice by one of the directors, by the chair rather, that I need to be more clear. So on the page 1, we're modifying the submit a proposal for a minimum of the following work. I'm adding a sentence there saying that it is required for high variation in influent loading to deal with potential variations in high influent loading. And then in the second point, where we've requested findings and recommendations for the improvements, we are modifying that to emphasize more on process optimization to address high variations in the influent loading. These are the 2 minor changes which we'd like to make it very clear. Of course, we're also planning on a mandatory site visit for the potential bidders. So that will be made very clear when we take them around the plant. Yes, please.
Catherine, I see your hand very large.
You're muted. Catherine, you're
So
muted.
I took my hand off the mute button. I wanted to ask if adding that language will restrict the examination of capacities, and do we need to make sure that it's not limited? I was a little concerned from some of the things Dan was saying on one of his most recent presentations about the capacity of the plant. And so I want to make sure that we are satisfying the complete set of needs in examining this instead of having to go back and redo it.
Yes, I do not think it would make a compromise in any of the analysis. I believe that it'll be clear. That's my understanding.
Thank you. I move that we submit this RFP and as soon as possible.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? I have one point I'd like to raise, and then Matthew has a point. I am concerned about the number of years of experience we are requiring. It seems as if that's going to limit our options. How many years of experience are we asking for in the consultant? 30 or something?
Yes, 30 years with activated sludge. That's right.
Well, I understand that would be good, but that feels as if there might be somebody with 20 years, which is a pretty long time. And if we're looking for someone with 30 years, we may be looking for someone who's, you know, maybe even less in touch with current technology and so forth, that perhaps 30 years is a bit more than we need. And I'm sorry I didn't raise this issue before, but just I wonder if you would consider just reducing that slightly. And did someone, I know Matthew, you want to speak to the general issues. Did you want to speak to the age issue, Deborah? Director Reddick?
Yes, I totally agree with Chair Dye on the issue of experience. I think we need to invite entrepreneurial and innovative thinking here. And that means, somebody who's, experienced, has credible portfolio, but not necessarily retired.
So I don't know if you'd be willing to consider just reducing those numbers a bit, so that we could, you can always choose the person with 30 years experience if someone applies, but I feel like we're really narrowing the field of people who might be willing to do this for us, and we're not getting somebody who has a track record of really being innovative and smart and using things. So if that's something you'd be willing to consider, I would like to suggest perhaps that.
Yes, so would you like to change it to 20 years instead of 30 years?
No, I'd like us to say with extensive experience, with these issues, and just leave it at that and not specify how many years.
That would leave it open because extensive could be 1 year, 2 years, it could be subjective. And it could invite firms who have very less experience. And right now, we really need a firm who has had many years of experience in dealing with this, like somebody who's done, who's got research background and who had experience to various processes like these. So it would be very difficult if we have.
Then I would say 5 years.
What would you be comfortable with, Kishan? What if you were to lower it? What's the lowest you would be comfortable going?
I would be very comfortable with 20 years experience.
All right, Catherine, you want to speak to the issue? Because I know Matthew wanted to speak to some general things, but
That's too much.
I just wanted to say this is an old plant. We're not redesigning it, and I want somebody with enough history to have been able to work with an antique plant.
I'm comfortable with 20. I hear Director Ruddock's concern, and I see her point, but in this case, I think 30 is too much, but I guess I think 20 would be okay with me.
I would say 15. I could go with 15.
16. Let's get Matthew in and see what he's saying.
Okay,
Well, on that point, without specifying a number of years, couldn't we just say we need firms that have experience with this particular kind of plant, and when they do the walkthrough, they'll know exactly what that means. And I would back up Chair Dye's what she said about this. It was we should tone this down. We should focus it more. The current language is very broad, and we're reacting here to a one-time incident with the BOD upset after 25, 30 years of operation. And so do we need another firm to come in and look at everything in the plant? I think we should focus on the process issues and not everything, or we just get another crazy $65 million CIP proposed that obviously we're not going to enact.
I'm with Matthew.
Kishan, could you speak to that? How are you going to be involved in making it clear to the people doing this that this is not, like, if you could do anything on this plant, what would you do?
Yeah, the very fact that our RFP does not talk of capital improvement projects or equipment changes, we're talking of process optimization. So when it's a process optimization, it doesn't involve anything like a 5-year CIP or a 20-year CIP that we are looking at. We're not looking at small items or items which contribute, directly or indirectly. So that's why the word process optimization is used, so that it clearly indicates how the plant can survive any such high loading coming in, high influent loading.
Can you, I'm going to go to Catherine, and then can you show us the proposed revised language? Share screen and show us the proposed revised language. Catherine, do you want to speak? Catherine.
Yes, I do. I think that it's important. My own experience has been that when I have something that is somewhat an older and complex piece of equipment, I want somebody who has a long history of working on it, particularly when the results of failure are so dramatic as with Sam. I think that Keishan's experience on time probably an experience is probably more valid than anyone sitting here on the board. And I suggest we trust Keishan.
Well, I think there seems to be general support for some change in that. Can we, we have a motion to approve. Keishan's going to show us the amended language and see if that's, Jeremy, do we need, if we were going to revise the language for the requirement, should we vote on revising it to Keishan's number of 20 to see if there's board support for that?
You could, or you could also, you could allow, allow him, because it sounds like there's been other suggestions as well. You could allow, approve going out with the RFP and allow Keishan to make additional changes as appropriate, as suggested by, during this meeting.
I think this board wants to know what those changes are.
Okay,
So,
all right,
I
sure.
think there's a difference of opinion on the number of years. I mean, I hear Director Slater Carter saying whatever Keishan wants is fine, and I hear I was content with reducing it from 30 to 20. Director Reddick would like to go down to 15, and I think all of those are valid points of view. And so, how do we take a vote? Director Reddick,
do we have a motion pending right now?
Yes, from Director Slater Carter to approve the RFP.
Do we ever get a second?
I'd like to make a clarification.
Yes.
And that would be that we specify that we're not talking about an individual that has 20 or 30 years experience, but that a firm, maybe individuals combined, have extensive experience of 20 or 30 years, but not an individual.
What is the language in the actual document?
It says, Sam requests proposals from engineering consulting firms that meet the following minimum firm qualifications. So it could be a firm which has a person who has minimum of 30 years experience in business developing professional engineering services in Northern California with expertise in activated sludge.
I would take out person and make it the firm that has that experience.
Debbie, who are you thinking about? Do you have a particular firm in mind?
Absolutely do not. Do you? I'm just talking about not restraining ourselves to only hiring retirees who have 30 years experience. You can have a firm where maybe one person has 15 or 20 years experience, a principal has 15 or 20 year experience. You might, and the firm as a whole have way more than 30 years experience on this issue. But I don't want to restrict it to the individual. If the firm as a whole can produce the capacity, the knowledge, and the experience that meets those criteria, that should be acceptable and not limited to one person. Because I guarantee you, if you say 30 years, we're going to be looking at people on the way out the door.
Okay, Director Lohman wants to speak to it.
I'd like to cancel my second. Can we just start over?
Okay.
Well, you'd have to ask Director Slater Carter to withdraw our motion, or you could have a substitute motion. Really, it's how y'all want to work it is we can make it work either way.
Director Slater Carter.
I think I am more than happy to withdraw my motion, but I think we're getting into such minuscule detail here and not trusting staff, and I'm very disappointed in the whole procedure. I may just abstain.
Okay. Director Lohman.
I would like to move that we modify the language to say a firm with 20 years of experience.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
All right. Is there further discussion on that? Could we have a
clarification? So it would be approving release of the RFP.
No, we're just changing this language.
Okay.
This is just to change this language, correct?
I assume we'd also then be releasing the RFP at that point too. So.
Okay, well, are we also accepting the change in the scope that Kitchen had proposed? I thought we might want to look at that, but if we don't need to look at that, we're fine. Does that include the revised scope as Kitchen read it to us?
I'd like to see that language or hear it again.
So you can separate out the votes. If you want to just vote on the issue of the particular minimum qualification, you can do that and then address separately the issue of approving the RFP and scope.
I think it'd be quicker if we just go ahead and say, Director Lohman has moved that we go with 20 years for the firm, correct?
Let's do that.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I seconded it already.
Yes, you did already, sorry. Okay, can we have a roll call on that?
Director Penrose? You're muted.
Yes.
Director Lohman?
Yes.
Director Clark?
Aye.
Director Raddock?
Aye.
Director Slater Carter?
You're muted.
You're muted.
No, and for the record, I really object to all this micromanagement of staff.
Chair Dye?
Yes. Okay. Second, now we're going to address the change in language about the description. And it could be incorporated into a motion to approve the whole thing, but I just thought we might want to look at this revised scope.
Do you want me to read it out?
Either, or is it handy to just throw it up on the screen? Or you can just read it if that's easier. Whatever is easier, let's move this along. So we have a closed session item we have to deal with as well.
Okay. So in the first page of the RFP, which is actually page 48 of your packet, it says the firms are in the third paragraph. It says the firms are requested to submit a proposal for a minimum of the following work. What was given to you earlier in the packet was a comprehensive review of the SAM WWTP processes and other available information with the purpose of establishing the plant operating parameters and capacity. I propose that change to a comprehensive review of the SAM WWTP processes and other available information with the purpose of establishing the plant operating parameters and capacity. This is identical to what was written earlier. In addition to that, I'm saying to deal with potential variations in high influent loading. That is point number one. The second point, which was earlier written in the RFP, which was in your packet, reads as follows. Develop a reporting of findings and recommendations for the improvements required at SAM WWTP. That is proposed to be changed to develop a report of findings and recommendations for process optimization to address high variations in influent loading at the SAM WWTP. These are the only two changes. And of course, I would also change the 20 years experience. Firm should have 20 years experience.
Okay. Do we have, first let's get a motion to approve it with that change.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there further discussion of those changes, which just clarify what the intention was? This isn't changing Kitchen's intention for what this RFP would do. It's just clarifying it, correct, Kitchen? Not
Yes,
changing.
Not changing, just clarifying, giving more information so that the contractor is very clear as to the purpose of the RFP.
Great. Any further discussion on this? Can we have a roll call vote?
Director Penrose,
Yes.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Raddock,
Aye.
Director Slater Carter, Director Slater Carter,
Still
Oh,
muted.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Chair Dye,
Yes.
motion approved.
Thank you. I think you did this. This will be very useful, and I'm really glad you're moving forward with this. So good job. And I'm glad we had the clarification just so it's more consistent with exactly what you wanted.
Thank
Okay,
you.
moving on. Item C, the Regional Water Quality Control Board Basin Plan, and questions about who is responsible for complying with it. Kishan, are you going to speak to this, or?
Jeremy is going to talk about it.
Kitchen, can you share the screen, the document I sent you before?
Oh,
Just
okay.
the excerpt from the Basin Plan Amendment?
I will. Give me a second, please.
Or I can try it if you want me to.
No, I can do that.
Yeah.
Can you see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Okay. Actually, so this is actually from the staff report, but it doesn't really matter. Let's go down the page a little bit, and I'll talk about it. Okay. All right, we can stop right there. So this has actually been an ongoing item for a while that just came to our attention today, and that's Chair Dye actually brought it to my attention and Kishan's. There's an effort, and apparently been ongoing for some time with the San Francisco Regional Water Quality Control Board to address impairment for bacteria in some of the beach areas within the city of Half Moon Bay and to the north in Grenada. The pretty controversial as bacteria often is. Bacteria is one of the most difficult contaminants to really address because there's so many different factors that can go into having bacteria exceedances, and there's also disagreement among the various regulatory agencies as to what the right bacteria indicators are. Particularly a difficult issue in the context of stormwater, but that's not really our issue today. The issue that Chair Dye brought to my attention, which I think is a valid one, and I wanted to discuss with the board, is the way there's specific things that the regional board has identified in two phases for trying to address in the sewer. The idea being that sometimes there's spills or leaking pipes that can lead to excessive bacteria. And so the regional board is requiring the submission of an enhanced sewer management plan, inspections associated with same. And then if we go down a little bit, hopefully we can get to phase two. I'm not sure if this document actually has phase two in it, but it's similar kinds of language. But you'll look, the problem is the implementing parties is SAM. And they have in parentheses, City of Half Moon Bay and Grenada Community Services District. But the way it's couched, it shows those entities as like a subset of SAM. When SAM does have some aspect of what's required, but individually there's parts of these requirements that SAM really can't do. Some of the repairs to collection systems, inspections, there's a variety of things, and it's a crossover of responsibilities. And so I think what would be ideal, and it's pretty late in the game, so I don't know if we're gonna be able to get the regional board to make the change or not, although this is simple enough that they may be willing to do it. And that is rather than the parentheses there, just change it to for implementing parties, SAM, comma, City of Half Moon Bay, comma, Grenada Community Services District. And so that way it shows that there's shared responsibilities, because some of what we don't want to have is SAM tasked with things that it really can't do, that doesn't really have a legal authority to do under our JPA structure. So I would like to bring this to the attention of regional board staff before they have this a hearing on Wednesday. I think they would likely be willing to make those changes because it's pretty minor and just it's a clarification. But I wanted to discuss it with the board first and see if anyone had any concerns, particularly Half Moon Bay. Chair Dye seems like she's supportive, but I want to make sure that the city didn't have any concerns because, it's something that could affect you in the future.
I just like to say, yeah.
I think we can support the comma.
Yeah, pretty much.
You don't want, SAM should not be responsible for what GCSD and Half Moon Bay do, and it just makes things more complicated. There's a lot of things not to like in this whole plan, but that's not the issue tonight. The issue tonight is who is responsible for providing an enhanced sewer system management plan. And according to this, it's SAM for both the city of Half Moon Bay and Granada Community Services and SAM itself. And that doesn't make any sense. So Director Reddick, did you want to speak to this?
No, I just think identifying any and all parties is important. So it would be SAM, Granada Community Services District, Half Moon Bay. What about Montera?
They're not really involved in the Pillar Point issues.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it's geographically distinct. So just so you know, the ones that are up right now, that's just the phase 1. And phase 2, there is, so if phase 1 doesn't work, there is, if load allocations are not met, then there'd be an enhanced sewer system management plan, acceptable executive officer with inspections and repairs. And so it's, it's similar language, and the fix would be the same. I just wanted you to know there was it wasn't just the language you see in front of you, but the concern identified would be fixed in the identical manner. Adding a comma.
Certainly, Half Moon Bay doesn't have the impact in the Pillar Point area that some others do.
Yes, well, Granada does, and wearing my Granada hat. I mean, if this means Sam's in charge of Granada's sewer system management plan, does that get Granada off the hook? I don't think so, but it just makes things more complicated. And now wearing my Sam hat, I'm saying, well, it's not Sam's job to make sure that Granada does what the Regional Quality Control Board wants done. So wearing my Sam hat here and saying, it's not Sam's job to make that Half Moon Bay and Granada do this. They're not part of
enforce our collection system, yeah.
That's the issue. The way the regional board set it up really doesn't properly account for the way a JPA operates and how lines of responsibility are differentiated. So
does anyone have any objection to Jeremy talking to the Regional Quality Control Board and trying to get a clarification on who the proper implementing parties are for this plan?
And or Kitchen, let me clarify, and because Kitchen would be, Kitchen knows the staff, so it'd be him with me.
No opposition.
No opposition.
Looks like Director Clark had a comment.
Director Clark.
Well, Jeremy, I would like to hear that you're going to go on that because the target here is the wrong target. I've been at the bacterial pollution in the Princeton Harbor for like 20 years. There have been 5 or 6 studies done. They've all concluded that it's not coming from the GCSD sewers. And I don't understand why we need an improved sewer system management plan when we're not the problem.
Well, that's a much more complicated. That's a much more complicated fix. If there is a way to go after that. The way you could do it. No, typically we would have. The city did comment and made some comments about more along the lines of timeline. Also, the city has stormwater responsibilities, so their comments were a little more focused on that, I think. But the way you would do it, you could petition the state board action, but without having extensively commented already, you haven't established an administrative record. It'd be tough.
So our only flexibility, I read the whole thing. Our only flexibility is really what our sewer system management plan looks like. And we're going to have to come up with something that works. You read the response to comments for this plan, and for pretty much all of the agencies, the Harbor District is very unhappy with the requirements that have been placed on them because they're being required to do all this stuff to control inputs that are outside their boundaries that they have no control over and so forth. It's multiple agencies that are being, lumped in with this, and there's no science behind what they're proposing. But the point is, to every comment, they said, nope, we don't care. We don't care what you think. We're leaving it the way it is. They're not changing the deadlines. They're not considering anybody's objections to the content of this. There's no unfunded mandate provision because the Regional Water Quality Control Board doesn't have any requirements in that thing. There's a lot more wrong with the plan. And we probably can't affect that at this point, but we can make sure that at least the responsibilities aren't kind of messed up with us, kind of intertwined with each other, and at least that might be fixable before Wednesday.
Yeah. And if there's a desire to go further from the board, that's something we would probably want to talk about in closed session.
So in the interest of moving on here, does anyone else have any concerns about this? And can we go back to the board so I can see everybody?
Catherine's waving her hand.
Yeah, I can't see everybody. Can we stop screen sharing? Thank you.
Yes.
Catherine, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, I did. I agree with Matthew. I've followed this for the 20 years, and it's been longer than that the problems have been there. And I think that we do need to address that maybe in a joint letter with the Harbor District. RCD did a study on this. They tried to blame it on dogs. They've tried to blame it on cattle ranches. It's probably a whole bunch of different things. Personally, I think it's all the raccoons, but that's neither here nor there. I also wanted to say, Barbara, that was a good catch, and thank you very much.
Well, I'm not sure we can deal with the substance of it, but we could deal with this mechanical thing before Wednesday. And if we want to take it up further, we can put it on the agenda again. Director Lohman.
First of all, the comment discussion earlier, it's obvious that Sam has pipes, Half Moon Bay has pipes, and Granada has pipes. So the commas that were suggested, I think, clarifies that completely. And again, when I was on Granada and they did those studies, they said, oh, that big pipe from Granada is leaking directly into the harbor. And it was, oh, by the way, folks, that's not a Granada pipe. That's just a stupid pipe. And we could probably get the RCD in on this and a whole bunch of other things. So I'm just backing up Matthew's comments and the comma discussion.
Well, right now we're looking about trying to do the comma discussion before Wednesday. And maybe we'll put this on the agenda again for further discussion of the more, the key issues.
To include in that is the fact that the county is in charge of stormwater.
I was going to say that earlier.
County's in there too. So everybody's in there.
I think
the parks, state parks is in there.
That's right. And
they have to do all this stuff.
I think we need to make a list of the parties who are in it and give it to the Regional Water Quality Control Board and say, this is the interested parties, each of whom has a share of what should be the goal to clean this up.
Oh, they're in there. Don't worry. They're all in there. All of those entities are in there. They've gone after everybody.
A follow-up I might do, if the board would like me to, I may follow up with Half Moon Bay and because I know I'd like to know who did their comment letter. I was unable, they didn't put it on the website, so I was unable to see it. It might be helpful to find out who some of the other parties who maybe challenges may be, so we're not, if we choose to go that route, we're not starting from scratch. We can build on efforts that others may be undertaking already.
For tonight, can we just agree to see if we can get the responsibility piece clarified by Wednesday and address more substantive issues? Because I guess we have a month to file a protest or something, right, Jeremy?
I second that motion.
Yeah.
Okay. So, am I making a motion? Usually the chair doesn't make the motion, but my motion is to direct Jeremy to talk to them to see if they can clarify the responsibilities, perhaps with commas. That's not in the motion. And we'll agendize this at our next meeting for a more substantive discussion. So, and there's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? No, roll call vote, please.
Director Penrose.
Aye.
Director Lohman.
Yes.
Director Clark.
Aye.
Director Ruddock.
Aye.
Director Slater Carter.
Yes.
Chair Dye.
All right.
Motion approved.
Who was our second, just to be clear on that?
Director
I
Ruddock.
was.
Director Reddick, okay.
No, I was.
I was.
Actually, Director Reddick's the one I saw. Director Slater.
Okay.
That's funny because I said I second that motion when you finished talking. So
Okay, well, it can be, I don't really, I'm
Mutual
sorry.
seconds.
I said it while she was still talking.
I thought about it earlier.
All right.
It doesn't matter either way.
Tie goes to Director Slater Carter next time.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, moving on to a general manager's report.
Okay, the detailed manager's report would be always in the second meeting of the month, but I just wanted to give you guys a quick update about what's happening on the wet weather storage expansion project. That project seems to be going properly as of now. No concerns. We are expected to finish it by the scheduled date of end March. The BMPs are in place. The contractor has been able to get special grading permit from the county, because we are not supposed to do any grading during this season, but with all the necessary documents, he was able to get a special permit. So the permits are in place. He's started removing the topsoil today in about 20% of the area, I guess. And those of you who've driven past, you would see big signs which show the project is in progress. So that's it. And I'll try and give you more updates in the next meetings, try to see if I can get some good pictures so that some of you can see that too. That's it. If you have any questions on anything else, staff is ready to answer.
I went by today and saw it, and you know, they're taking off the topsoil, and there was an archaeologist and a cultural resources expert on hand, and the person from Tanner who is representing Sam and keeping an eye on things. So looks like it's proceeding really well.
Thank you.
Any more comments on that? Okay, moving on to attorney's report.
Yeah, I just have one quick piece of legislation to update the board on. That's AB 377. It's a Coastkeeper-sponsored bill, and they've captioned it the California Clean Water Act, which California already has a Clean Water Act in the form of Porter Cologne, but it's creative marketing, I guess. In any event, it's a bill that's got CASA and CASQA, and to a lesser extent, the Association of California Water Agencies, AQUA, pretty concerned. It basically would take away and prohibit a lot of the regulatory flexibility that allows agencies to continue to operate in where you have regulatory standards that simply aren't possible to meet, which is often the case because the standards can be set, the basin plan standards can be set as standards that are, you know, one could argue not consistent with human habitation. And the way that agencies have been able to continue operating is by doing alternative compliant methodologies, site-specific objectives, use attainability analyses, things that allow for the uses that, you know, fishable, swimmable, drinking water supply, for those uses to continue to be met while not meeting numeric standards, or at least not in the interim that it, you know, sometimes can be impossible to meet. So this bill would take away all that flexibility. It limits the ability to use schedules of compliance and time schedule orders, and it requires an impaired waterways enforcement program that ramps up and requires enforcement of all water quality standards, which, particularly in the stormwater context, it would be a disaster, but it could really be a big problem for Sam as well, to the extent we wind up out of compliance or have ocean plan standards that become more stringent in the future. So just, it's an issue that is, there are others who are fully engaging on this already, but I just wanted the board to be aware of it. It is something that people are really concerned about. And so I just wanted you to know that it was out there. It's another Hertzberg bill, and Senator Hertzberg is, he's a believer in go big or go home. And so this is definitely something that's controversial, and he's not afraid to take that on. So that's my report. I just wanted to let the board know that's out there and something that's probably going to be important to watch as we move forward.
Can you provide some information about it to us?
Sure. Yeah, I've got, I can certainly do that.
Yeah, I believe Hertzberg is also the author of that bill authorizing wastewater treatment plants to also treat stormwater.
Well, that one sounds sensible, actually, but this one's a bit more problematic.
Yeah.
All right. Anything further? Director's report. Director's reports. Topics for future board consideration. Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, then I guess we will convene we'll convene in closed session.
In 5 minutes, a 5-minute break.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's go.
We're
Okay.